I thought it was a really interesting session this morning looking at public attitudes towards housing and how they've changed over the years. I mean, you go back perhaps 10 years and the real obsession was around house prices. Now I think there's a real public interest in supply. But what I think we learned was that it's not just about housing as a national issue. Certainly we saw in the leaders' debate on television only last night, housing the second question asked. We can see that the political parties are taking housing much more seriously than they did at the last election. All the manifestos include at least something on housing, and for some of them it's a really quite hefty selection on it. But I think there is a real question about public attitudes towards housing. A very divided society, really, between those who are worried about house prices. Presumably, sometimes they think they're too high. For other people, they're worried about maintaining the value of their home, because that's obviously where they've stored much of their equity. So that's really part of it. Not sure yet that the public are convinced that national politicians are the people really to make a difference in terms of housing supply. I think that people still imagine that that's a job for private house builders, or perhaps local authorities. There's still a sense, I think, that councils build council houses, even though of course often it is now going to be housing associations taking the lead on that. Until I think that the public recognise that there is a job for national government, for the state at sort of Whitehall level, to try and change the dynamics of the housing market, then I don't think it's ever really going to be right up there with schools and hospitals and the economy. And for the sector, and I think this did come out in the session this morning, I think it's about changing the story, changing the narrative, so that, for instance, social housing isn't just a story of the vulnerable and the deprived. It's actually a story for all of us that makes sense for everyone, whatever tenure they happen to be in, that we should be looking at what social housing could mean for making our country better. So a real challenge, I think, at the end of the session. Public attitudes are certainly more focused on housing than they were, but perhaps there's a job for all housing professionals to think about how we can get the key messages across to people so that they can have an informed, rational discussion about housing in the future.